So before our working lunch, we'd like to move on to the second session of the day, Responsible Business and Social Compliance. And with that, may I please have the pleasure to invite Ms. Isabel Nikra, First Secretary, Deputy Head of Economic Section, Embassy of the Kingdom of Netherlands to Malaysia. Ms. Isabel, please. May I also invite the panelists for this segment to be on stage. Puan Zalili Zaman Khan, Group Procurement Officer, FGV Holdings Berhad. Mr. Bora Gulpina, Global Head of Environment, Health and Safety, Ansel. Ms. Tanjia Earn, Cluster ESG Manager, Hyatt Hotels in Kuala Lumpur. Puan Haja Noranisa, Chief Risk Integrity and Governance Officer, SP Setia Berhad. Please take a seat on stage, and Isabel, the floor is yours.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Dear panel, thank you for joining this discussion. I realize that we are the last session away from lunch, and that's always a bit of a tricky place to be, but we'll do our best and make sure to have an engaging and interesting discussion for all of you. I think we have here a very diverse group of panelists representing different sectors, different angles also to the ESG journey that I think many of you will talk about a bit later today. And in a world of global supply chains, there is the strength of promises on labor, environment, and governance also lies in the verification and accountability. So we have here leaders from procurement, manufacturing, hospitality, and real estate, which are sectors that are also exposed to supply chain risk. And today in this session, we will explore a bit more about how to embed social compliance, traceability, and sustainable procurement into operations, not as add-ons, but also as core business logic. As my ambassador said this morning, it pays to stay ahead of the curve. At the embassy, we try to do our share as well. We take small step, cross-sectoral approaches with ESG at the center. We're not flawless, yet we try, and I think that's what should be the start. Anyhow, in this session, we will have different presentations from the panelists shortly with some Q&A after. We will look into questions like how to manage traceability across layers, but also how to ensure supplier compliance without overburdening the smaller players, and how to build incentives instead of penalties. Without further ado, because I know we're a bit short of time, I would like to introduce Puan Zalili Mohammed Zaman Khan from FGB, the Group Procurement Officer, to give a small presentation on your ESG efforts.
Thank you, Isabel. Very good afternoon, everybody. Before I continue with my slide, perhaps I can give a bit of perspective on the organization that I represent here today. FGV is an agribusiness company in Malaysia and is the largest producer of crude palm oil. Our business is integrated. It starts from planting of the palm trees, to onward processing and distribution of our products. That some of them we see on the shelves for consumption. Some go into oleochemicals that produce consumer products like the detergents and all that we use, the detergents, the soaps and things like that we use daily. Okay. So we operate in approximately 350 sites all over the world, majority of which I think more than 300 of it is in Malaysia. So if we move to the next page of my deck. Okay, so we have a sustainability framework that was established earlier, but we had an enhancement of it that was launched in July 2024. And zooming in directly to the topic that we are carrying today, there's the element of traceability, responsible sourcing, and supply chain management forming part of our framework. If we go to the next page, the effect of the enhanced sustainability framework on procurement strategies. It aligns FGV's group strategies related to procurement, yes, cost savings, governance, and sustainability. It enhances our supply chain code of conduct and award of documents. So ever since the enhanced sustainability framework was released, a lot of work has gone into these efforts. Yeah. We have also been enhancing our KYC, know your customer or know your vendor, through vendor registration and validation. Our sourcing process now include ESG considerations, and we emphasize on educating suppliers through engagements. I think there's a page missing on some of the points that I wanted to touch on. It's here. Yeah. Okay, how do we operationalize traceability and no deforestation sourcing? We rely, for the palm oil industry, we are fortunate that there are best practice standards out there in the market, and we rely on compliance to the Malaysian standards for palm oil and also the RSPO, which is more globally accepted. But the MSPO has really helped spur smallholders compliance or raising the standards by the smallholders to meet the minimum standards of the MSPO. We have information on practices which are gathered through engagement sessions when we have our engagement sessions with our smallholders. We also have a system called the FGV Traceability of Product System, which provides traceability of the crude palm oil which are delivered from our plantations. We have a checklist based on MSPO indicators and EUDR requirements and random verification on site. Because our operations is quite well distributed all over Malaysia, there's a lot of resources that we have allocated to ensure compliance, especially to the MSPO standards. One of which is having regional controllers just to go and visit the FFB suppliers and to inspect the processes when the FFB is delivered to ensure that all the traceability information is made available. So we also have a checklist on MSPO indicators and EUDR requirements and random verification on site, which I mentioned earlier. We have alerts through our grievance management system in the case of any deforestation for investigation. On supplier engagement and capacity building, there are various avenues that we do with special focus actually on our FFB related, because FFB, the fresh fruit bunch which comes from our palm oil mill, is our primary concern. And we have a lot of smallholders engaging with us, supplying their fruits. So engagement with the smallholders is something that we spend a lot of time and resources on. Just this year, I think we have engaged with about, we have had about 15 to 20 engagement sessions with about 500 smallholders. And this is something that we do on a continuous basis. It's not just one-off. And in these sessions, we impart knowledge about the standards. We get information from them as to how they're operating and complying with the standards. We also launched what we call in Malay Kebun Angkat, or what you might be more familiar with the term adoptive farms, as an initiative with the Malaysian Palm Oil Board in January 2025, and we have onboarded 20 participants and going through a process of engaging with them to identify their pain points to assist them. On non-FFB related, we do supplier roadshows and we have a vendor development program as well. Okay. One point that I have been requested to also address in this presentation is challenges in auditing and compliance. I think across the estates and downstream supply, the challenges is the multi-location that we do business in all over Malaysia. So a lot of resources is placed on checking and auditing and supervising kind of work. Access to suppliers' records due to the confidentiality restrictions, as you all may understand or be familiar with the PDPA regulations. Okay. I think that's all that I have prepared for the presentation today. We'll talk more on the Q&A.
Yes, thank you very much. I think it gives a wonderful insight how FGV also has checks and balances in place to look at the, big round of applause, please, for Pansalili. Thank you. And if I may follow up with a short question, with your experience, I know firstly as an internal auditor and now as the group procurement officer, and FGV's move to a more enhanced sustainability framework, what would you say is the biggest bottleneck in enforcing the compliance throughout the supplier network, and how can actors, public or private, support?
Okay. If you look at our supplier base, on the FFB side, we have 888 independent smallholders, 271 FELDA settlers. And on the non-FFB side of the business, we have 11,200 active suppliers, of which 77% are micro and small businesses. So this sheer, numbers that I just mentioned just now automatically brings with it complexity in communicating and trying to place them at a certain standard that we expect. So we spend a lot of resources engaging, but it's still not enough. As you can imagine, one engagement over half a day, we probably get only 20% in across to them. So that's the pain point for us.
Thank you. That's, I think, a very clear understanding of the bottlenecks in front. Can we move on to the next presentation? Mr. Bora Gulpinar, Head of the Global Environment and Health Safety in Ansell. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Isabel. First of all, I'm very lucky and happy sitting together with the expert ladies in this panel. And diversity is not only limited with the gender, and as Isabel highlighted, that we are representing different industries, hospitality, production, and food industries. And I want to talk about especially sustainable and responsible sourcing. But before talking about the sustainable and responsible sourcing, I just want to highlight what's the problem. And just to explain this problem, I just selected 3 examples. And the first example is coming from the BBC News. And you can see there is an accident resulted with the 15 fatalities. And this accident has happened in Bangladesh. And I didn't copy-paste the remaining part of the accident in here, in the news, but it's just mentioning multinational companies working with this supplier. So what does it mean? The problem means that the number one and most important for me is 15 fatalities. On top of that one, this is a loss for the business, financial loss, reputational loss for the multinational companies. I selected second example from US, and maybe you can see that you are producing your product, sending to the one of the most profitable and biggest market in the world, America, and then expecting that you are selling your product. But the border authority is saying that, sorry, you cannot go to the market because you are just facing with the CSR issue due to child labor, forced labor. So again, the problem is in here for the company is losing market share, losing money especially. And third example, no need to go to the far away, and I'm just talking about the Malaysia current situation in here. We are facing with the migrant workers. And unfortunately, sometimes companies are not following the CSR requirements and facing a big issue regarding to migrant workers. So as summarized in here, for the sustainable and responsible sourcing, companies are facing with the several big issues. Financial issues, business interruption, market loss, and the most important, fatalities. So you can say that, okay, Bora, we understand. This is a big problem, and go and solve this problem. But solving this problem is not an easy thing, especially. And it's a quite complex situation. Why it is complex, I just want to give an example from our company. And we have 16 different production facilities distributed all around the world. In these 16 different facilities, as a global sourcing, we are working with 965 different suppliers. And this supplier is only managed by the global team, not the, I'm not mentioning about the suppliers, small suppliers managed by the local team. Nearly 1,000 suppliers. Okay, maybe you can say that it is manageable, but we have to control this supplier with the 12 different principles. What is these 12 different principles especially? You have to check their health and safety. You have to check their financial. You have to check them based on the CSR, migrant worker, child labor. You have to check them, especially environmental legislation. So 12 different categories. But when you are checking these 12 different categories, and you have to look for deep dive. And this deep dive is including 38 different elements. So maybe if you are curious audience in here, you can take out your mobile phone and open your calculator app and try to calculate what is the big load. Big load is this, 36,670 questions. You have to sit in front of your supplier and say that, are you paying your salaries for your employees? He said that, yes. Show me the evidence. And then he will give you a bunch of the paper. And all of the paper, you will look for the detail. January paid, February paid, March paid, last year paid. So you have to ask this question 36,670 times. So you can understand, problem is over there, complexity is very big. So how we have to manage? Maybe you can say that, Bora, it is too complex. Turn off the light, close the door, shut the business. No need. Definitely it can be manageable. How we are managing, especially we are managing with the 3 main steps. I think everybody is familiar with the win-win methodology. And I change a little bit, improve this win-win methodology. And I am saying that managing supplier is like a marriage. So when you are talking about the marriage, you are talking about the long-term relation. So you exactly need to implement a relationship with your supplier is a long-term. In this long-term supplier relation should be collaborative. You have to work together with the supplier. You cannot say that, oh, this is all your responsibility, I'm not doing anything. So you have to work together with them. And at the end, you have to set a goal. When you are having a marriage, you are saying that, oh, we will have a happy family, 2 kids, 2 dogs especially. And you have to make this kind of expectation together with the suppliers. After you get this contract, especially for the marriage contract, you have to define standards, framework. So where is this standards and framework is coming from? Mainly it is coming from the local legislation. Some parts of the world, there is a well-developed local legislation, but mainly most of the world, we are suffering regarding to lack of legislation. So what you have to do, on top of this lack of legislation, you have to follow the international standards. International standards are giving a good guidance regarding to supplier management. And in case of need, based on the industry, based on the expectation from the companies, you can write down your local company expectation. So at the end, don't expect that supplier will implement all of them 100%. You can write down a mail and saying that, oh, this is the list of standards, this is the legal legislation, and sending to your supplier, and don't expect that Mr. Supplier is following all of them. You have to work together with them, increasing the capability, guiding them, teaching them especially. Last thing regarding to supplier management is important one is regular follow-up. It's not like putting your TV in front of you, plug and play. You have to work together with them with the regular follow-up. How you have to make regular follow-up? When you are visiting the supplier, you cannot say that, oh, this is wrong, this is not good, this is not implemented. Instead of that kind of things, you have to sit together with the supplier and saying that, look, in this manner, if you are making some mistake, it will cause you loss of money, loss of market share. So this means that you have to work with the constructive approach. When you are working with the supplier, definitely you have to make it written, based on the data, based on the result driven. Because if you are living from that area, supplier will have written records and follow these kind of things. And don't write down anything on behalf of the supplier. Try to work together with them. They can find what they will do as an improvement action. At the end, it's like a marriage. Always we have to make a good communication, good feedback, and we have to share the best practices. Supplier may not reinvent the wheel. So this is the reason, guide them in order to improve in the future. As a summary for that kind of things, it's a big problem, as I mentioned to you. It may cause financial loss, market share, fatalities. It's a complex situation. It's not an easy situation you have to manage. But you can manage in three main items. Number one, think supplier relation like a marriage, long-term marriage. Number two, define your framework and standards. Number three, make a regular follow-up and ensure that everything is under control.
Thank you, Mr. Bora. Thank you very much for this insightful insight into to the marriage of Hansel as well. Yeah, warm applause, please, for Mr. Bora. And if I may ask, it's in line with what I think you've already shared, but what's really on my mind is how do you balance this strict compliance rules with also being flexible in your supplier relationship, and how do you, specifically in the lower capacity regions, how do you engage in that sense?
Very good question. Especially before talking about that one, I just want to share some numbers together with you. In Malaysia, officially, 2.1 million migrant workers is working in here. And this, compared to the industry, it's changing from 20 to 30%. So which means that when you are working with the supplier, you have to ensure that everything is under control. What we have to do, and as I mentioned to you, writing down all of them in the mail and sending to the supplier is not a solution. What you have to do, you have to work together with them. Try to understand their barrier. Based on this barrier, you have to guide them, teach them, and monitor them to reach this expectation. What we are doing as an answer, definitely we define as a supplier management framework. This supplier management framework is ensuring that there is a tier supplier. And based on the location, if there is a strict legislation, definitely countries are following this kind of things. But if it is not, definitely we are using this supplier management framework and ensuring that they are fully in line with our expectation.
Thank you. That sounds as a framework that's really useful, so in practice. Thank you. We will now move on to the next presentation. Ms. Jia Earn from Hyatt Hotels KL. You're the Cluster ESG Manager overseeing Hyatt properties mainly in Kuala Lumpur. Can I give you the floor, please?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Isabel, for that wonderful introductions. First, I'd like to thank you, Control Union, in the confidence in having your event here at the ballroom. And I'm happy to be here with the panel speaker and sharing with everyone here today. So when we talk about responsible or sustainable hospitality, it's really about caring for the people and the planet that we share and every single state. So in hospitality, our business actually builds on relationship with our guests, our colleagues, even with our supplier. So practicing responsible business, it means ensuring that every one of this relationship creates a positive impact. From the moment a guest starts to arrive to a hotel's checking in, to the food that is served to their table, the linen that is used in the room, even with the event space that we're in here today, hosting conference or celebrating occasions like weddings. Every touch point carries a story of people, productions, and also to our planet. Our industry actually touches the communities and the environment every single day. This is why responsible business in hospitality goes beyond compliance. It's actually woven into the guest experience and their trust to us as a service provider. This is where responsible sourcing and supply chain transparency comes in, ensuring that the value we promise to our guests is truly reflected in the way we do business. To set the context, I'd like to share how Hyatt approached sustainability through our World of Care framework, which reflects how we put these ideas into action. At Hyatt, our purpose is quite simple: care. We care for people so they can be their best. World of Care reflects Hyatt ESG global commitment through 3 interconnected pillars that drives how we operate, how we source and engage with the communities. First, when we talk about environment, we care for the planet by reducing carbon emission, conserving energy and water, eliminating single-use plastics, and adopting circular solutions. Secondly, when we talk about social, we care for the people, regardless who they may be: guests, colleagues, supplier, even our communities, by supporting well-being, inclusion, and advancing a culture of opportunity for all. Last but not least, when it comes to governance, we care for responsible business, building trust through ethics, transparency, stakeholder engagement, and responsible business practice. Together, these 3 main pillars remind us that sustainability is not just a department. It's actually a mindset that's embedded in how we operate in our daily lives. Responsible sourcing is not just about procurement. It's about partnership, transparency, and shared value across every supplier. Our supply chain is incredibly diverse, from food and beverage to amenities, linens, and guest services. A few real examples that I'll be sharing here today is actually from Grand Hyatt, although I believe there's a lot of hotels across the industry is already practicing similar initiatives. We see more farm-to-tables collaborations, such as working with local growers like Cultivate, who supply fresh, pesticide-free produce directly to the hotel kitchen. The image that you see right here is actually of vegetables that are grown in-house from an existing farm that we have at level 5 of our office. Others are adopting circular economy solution like Wonder Brew Kombucha, who transform pineapple skin from our own hotel's productions, transform into new produce, while reducing waste at the same time supporting local entrepreneurs. At the same time, hotels are also addressing to the plastic challenge by installing in-house bottling systems such as EcoTaps, the glass bottle that you see on your tables, and many more are moving towards large format bathroom amenities to minimize single-use plastics. Hence, you no longer see those travel-sized amenities as often as before. These examples shows that responsible sourcing isn't just about doing more, it's about doing better, being intentional, innovative, and collaborative on how we work with our supplier. Responsible business doesn't just stop at sourcing, it extends into how we operate every day. In hospitality, operations involve large consumption of water, energy, and materials. So maintaining transparency and accountability is very crucial. To strengthen credibility, many hotels are now aligning with the international and regional certifications that verify responsible practice. For instance, FSC look into responsible source paper, packaging, and wooden materials. MSC and ASC looks into ensuring sustainable seafood sourcing, RSPO, promoting responsible palm oil use. And when it comes to GBI, it's a Malaysia benchmark for sustainable building design, energy, and water efficiency. Then when it comes to Green Key is a leading global eco-label for hotels and tourism establishment, recognizing sustainability performance across operations. Together, these certifications and practice make sustainability measurable, transparent, and part of everyday hotel culture. It's not just a policy on paper. In hospitality, everything we do connects back to the people, our guests, our colleagues, even to the community that we serve. Responsible business isn't just about compliance or policy, but it's about care, integrity, and working together and making a positive impact. When we source responsibly, support our partners, operate transparently, we strengthen both our business and the trust that people place in us. Because at the heart of hospitality, it's caring for the people and also means caring for the planet and the world that we share.
Thank you very much. Right on time, on the spot. Thank you very much. A warm applause for Jairan, please. And if I can follow up with a small question. We had a bit of a chat before this panel, and I realized how much of the customer journey is, how huge it is, and also how many opportunities there are for greening or more sustainable practices. But at the same time, it is also challenging to scale consistent supplier standards across the whole hospitality chain. Can you share a bit more on what these challenges are and how you tackle them?
So one thing in terms of the hospitality industry, it does reflect in how we deal with the people and everyone else. So supplier is also one of the engagement that we really look into, because like Mr. Bora and Puan Zalili mentioned, supply chain is very complex. Same goes to the hotel chain. So we have hundreds and hundreds of overs of supplier and even thousands of ingredients and product that we look into. So one of the challenge would be alignment and also the enforcement, because even within the same brand of the hotels under the Hyatt, we have different properties that have different standards, and even the location may also affect how we source our suppliers, because different hotels have a different needs and also they look into different kind of products. So one of the things is the complexity that we look into the supply chain. That's one of the challenge. And another thing is also the knowledge and the capacity gap, because when it comes to international chain, we look into sourcing internationally and also locally. But when it comes to the local authenticity, is the support that we need to give it more of an engagement to them and understand from their perspective that what do they need, and sometimes it's the support that they need from us to feed back to them and just listen. So when we understand from their perspectives, then we can do better and serve back to the community. Because a lot of the time, it's not just about compliance, it's just building that partnership and collaboration with our supplier and make it more consistency. So the consistency when it comes to supplier is quite important as well, because when it comes to F&B, we can't ensure that everyone has to be MSC certified, because we look into the availability of the product as well. So one thing would be the complexity of the supply chain and the necessity of the property itself, I would say.
Thank you, and I like how you mentioned just listening, and I think listening is often the first biggest step in supplier relationship. That's important for future engagement as well. Let us move on to the next presentation. Anicha, I'm very happy to have you here, the Chief Risk, Integrity and Governance Officer at CP Setia Berhad. I know you worked on the establishment of a green roadmap and the ESG scorecard. Could we please invite you to share a bit more?
Okay, a very good afternoon to everyone. Thank you, Isabel. I know I'm between you and lunch. I'll try my best to go through what Setia has, but basically looking at what I'm doing, I'm actually doing risk and integrity in SP Setia. So basically in terms of the journey itself, I think we have been trying to embed the elements of ESG even before the enforcement of ESG and the concepts of ESG. But basically right now I think it's more than critical, it's actually important more than ever, because in terms of the elements that we have to make sure that now it's being transparently done, and the stakeholders' expectation has actually increased in terms of making sure that wherever or how much they have been putting money into the company, they would want to know in terms of their outcome and return. So basically when you talk about a property developer, I'll just move on to my next slide. So basically it's a journey for all of us. For Setia, it has been quite a journey in terms of trying to establish the elements of ESG, because if you know, in terms of property developer, when it comes to project on site, so that has actually been transferred in terms of the obligation to make sure that they comply with whatever law and regulations on site. But basically in Setia, at the corporate level, we need to make sure that whatever that we are enforcing onto them is actually working as intended. So basically when you talk about the governance itself at group level, we have strong tone at the top, right from the board room right down to the operational level. So basically in terms of making sure that we have responsible practices, there's a keyword for today, right? Responsible, and making sure that it's effective as well, to make sure that we build trust and credibility. That's another word for today, trust. In terms of having it being implemented, we need to make sure that we have a proper framework in place, and also the policies to support implementation. Of course, that would need to go through a proper governance structure in terms of how it's being led and it's being, driven at group, right down to implementation at project sites and businesses. On the other point that I'm going to talk about is risk management, and I will touch a bit on financing framework. So basically in risk management, that's one of the requirements as well when you talk about ESG. Like what I think everybody is experiencing here in Malaysia and also globally, new standards is requiring for all companies, being a listed co as well. I think we need to now look into the sustainability risks and opportunities. Basically, that's a blessing in disguise for risk practitioners as well. Looking at the past 25 years of being, doing risk management, I think this is the era where I see the practitioner would be, I can say, upgraded in terms of the importance of, why we need risk management. So basically, in terms of sustainability per se, I think what we need to look at, or we have been actually looking at the ESG scorecard, and that's how we move forward in terms of looking into implementation and tracking achievements of our green roadmap. So basically, that's how we integrate risk management into sustainability. And of course, later I'll just show a bit in terms of what we have established for financing framework that actually incentivize green projects so that we can be eligible for green financing, which is supposedly cheaper and improve the feasibility of the projects. Lastly but not least is the supply chain management. Again, like what Chair Ern and Bora and Lily has been talking about, how do we engage with our supply chain and how do we maneuver and also help out in terms of how they can actually comply, especially for the SMEs. Okay? So quickly, I'll just skip that. Basically, the governance framework we've got the Board Sustainability Committee, a separate board altogether that looks into specific ESG matters. And we've got the MSC, which is chaired by our CEO. So that happens on a quarterly basis as well. So basically, they will actually propose and recommend reports and proposals up to the board. And of course, we have the sustainability working groups at the working level, looking at all the material matters that needs to be reviewed and implemented across the group. Okay, so strong tone from the top is also important to make sure that it's being implemented and to ensure in terms of ownership and accountability at all levels. So framework, something similar to what Lily has as well, I think, just now. So basically, with our purpose, what do we have in terms of ESG elements? and of course looking at all the UN SDGs elements as well, and governance is one of the key pillars to make sure that it's being done transparently and being tracked accordingly. Okay, so basically in terms of policies, to strengthen the governance part of it. So of course we have code of conduct, that's one of the key ones that also covers our business associates, our vendors and suppliers. Labor practices, we have a labor policy as well. Anti-bribery, I'm looking at that as well for group, which is looking into what MACC is aspiring to make sure that all the GLCs is having a very good, effective anti-corruption management. And of course, the rest will be sustainability, biodiversity, and of course, HSE. Okay, so a little bit on our sustainability financing framework. We've just actually established this earlier this year, basically still in a journey to make sure that our projects will be eligible to get all this financing on board. So with this, I think it's more structured in terms of how we would want our projects to be right from the beginning in terms of project design and planning, and also looking into the alternative green materials that we can actually use to make sure that we achieve our ESG goals. So basically, this is an ongoing thing, it's a journey, and hopefully this will also incentivize our supply chain to make sure that we can work together in the ecosystem in terms of alternative materials that we can actually use. Okay, risk management, like I mentioned earlier, is being integrated. This is being tracked throughout the group. It's very structured in terms of making sure that the ownership is very clear and the tracking and oversight is actually being done on a periodic basis, right? And last but not least, in terms of supply chain management, we do regular engagement and awareness sessions with all of our supply chain and stakeholders, basically making sure that when they're on board, they're aligned with our aspirations and commitment towards, you know, like for example, zero bribery, zero accidents and all that, and making sure that the enforcement is being done accordingly as well. Because I think nowadays when you see on the board, basically in terms of the responsibility of the board, they are very concerned in terms of their duty of care. So we have to make sure that this is being implemented accordingly. Okay, so again, like what Chairman has been saying as well, very important, we need to continuously engage and align in terms of what we want the supply chain to actually be doing, and also try to facilitate them in adopting our ESG initiatives and goals, and making sure that, you know, we are on the same page in terms of whatever that we want to do. So, of course, also ensuring compliance. And with that, I end my presentation. Thank you, Isabel.
Thank you. Warm applause, please. Thank you, Anisha, for sharing how the different frameworks also complement each other, also on the different levels, I think, of the organization. Maybe Mon are looking in, detailing a bit more into the social compliance part. And as a large employer and developer, how do you manage and monitor social compliance, particularly like labor rights, safety, ethical recruitment, across your contracting ecosystem?
Okay, like I mentioned earlier, I think in terms of supply chain overall, we've got dedicated departments that look into our due diligence when we want to onboard our business associates, be it vendors, suppliers or contractors. So basically looking into the whole ecosystem to make sure that we're aligned. Like for example, making sure that we're not dealing with vendors and business associates that's not in line with what we want, and you know, have some concerns or issues with the laws and regulators. So we are very careful in doing our selection. It's very structured in terms of our pre-qualification, tracking of performance if they're on board, and I would say blacklisting if they're not performing. But of course, when you talk about the onboarding process, we will also facilitate in terms of making sure that they can adopt easily, especially like I mentioned earlier for SMEs. I can actually speak in terms of when we do the roadshows for our anti-bribery and corruption roadshows. So we have to make sure that they understand what we want, and we also would facilitate in terms of if they say they would need assistance in adopting the anti-bribery policy. So we would assist in terms of making sure that they would have one good, simple policy for them to adopt. On material selection, for example, we will also have some in terms of our processes that includes committee to ensure quality and sourcing of alternative green material with proper certification. So we make sure that if we on board the suppliers, they are actually genuinely supplying green materials. So that is very important. And also in terms of our enforcement via the contract clauses. So basically, we provide for clauses to ensure that they comply, and if they are not complying, so there is a provision on termination and blacklisting like I mentioned earlier. And of course, last but not least, the periodic audit that is being conducted based on what is required under labor management, i.e. in terms of the requirement on labor quarters, for example, and also in terms of safety and health. That's in a nutshell for Setia. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. And I think it shows also how in the different stages of employability there can be checks and balances to have the social compliance.
Yes.
Thank you. I think we're almost rounding off this panel, and I would like to pose one more question to each panelist, if that's okay with you as well. Maybe I can start with you, Ponsalili, about the traceability across layers. So it often breaks down into several layers, and that means different practices on different levels. And what practical tools have you used to consider to enforce multi-tier traceability? A digital platform or a third-party audit? Or?
For FGV, I mentioned earlier, we are an integrated company, and one of the companies that we have under our wing is an IT company. So we have developed our own solution called the FGV traceability of product system. So in this system, it is at the moment applied for all our fruit supplies coming from the estates. And at the mill, when before the fruits are admitted for processing, all the information regarding where the fruits came from, right to the source, the estate, the block of the estate, and the real source of the fruit is recorded. So even if it comes from, because the fruits can be sold from the smallholder to the dealers and then onward to FGV. So the information that is required in the system will capture all this. And therefore it enables us to trace even if it's multi-tier. Yeah. So the system has been working wonderfully. We are now able to have 100% traceability to our meal and 80% traceability to the plantations, which is the source of the fruits, using the system. So we hope to progress better to get to 100% traceability to plantation.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing, and interesting to hear also how the system, I assume, further trains itself to specify. Thank you. Mr. Bora, I think you touched upon it already, the topic of migrant labor, and I think migrant labor is or Malaysia is known as a hotspot for migrant labor, and whether this can be directly employed or somewhere in the supply chain. And you mentioned also how you have discussions with your suppliers about, to what extent is a checklist, but how do you take, let's say, the next step in practically engaging on these checklists? Because a checklist is easily provided, which is a challenge. Can you share a bit more about that?
Definitely, checklists need to be checked and ensure that everything is in place. So what we are doing, especially for that kind of things, this problem is not one company's problem. This problem is not one industry's problem. Every industry is suffering from this kind of problems, and everybody is facing this issue. What we are saying that we have to go with the layers of defense. So first layer of defense is starting with the local legislation. As I mentioned, companies should follow the local legislation, and we have to ensure that 100% is comply. So we are checking each and every supplier comply with the local legislation. Second layer, we are thinking that organizations should have alliance. For example, in our rubber industry, manufacturing industry, we have RBA. And this responsible business alliance is helping us to guidance and monitor supplier, because this supplier is not only supplying to our company. This supplier is also working with the many other companies especially. So work with the alliance, work with the other industries is also second check in our item. Third layer of defense is coming from convincing, working together with the own supplier. As I mentioned to you, it's like a marriage. If we want to continue this kind of things in a long term, they have to also do their work. And based on our experience, we are just seeing that if you convince supplier and making a mutual relationship, 80%, 90% of the task is done by the supplier level. So as a simple answer, we are doing with the layers, and first layer of defense is legal compliance. Second layer of defense, industry alliance. Third layer of defense is supplier is doing our own job.
Thank you. That's a very, I think, holistic approach to the checklist, so to say. Thank you for sharing. And Ern, maybe if I can ask you about how have you structured incentives versus penalties, which yields more sustainable compliance? So let's say preferential terms or capacity support versus contractual clauses or other measures.
To be honest, when it comes to incentive or penalty, no one wants penalty. But when it comes to incentive, how we incentivize our supplier in doing, to comply to what we do, actually is the engagement within our team with the supplier itself. Because a lot of the time, especially the local suppliers, the SMEs, they just want to be heard. They want to be engaged and bring what they do, the things that they value, bring up to the business and operations. So a lot of the time, it still boils back to how we engage to our suppliers, how we understand from their perspective and what they want to bring their value to us. Because our value may align with them, because how they bring it to the table is how we support with each other. Because a lot of the time when it comes to supply chain, it's about engagement, it's about support that we give each other. And by then we can collaborative partnership with them. From there, we then innovate how we can bring out this supply chain to the hotel.
Thank you. That's a very interesting, I think, thorough approach as well. Thank you. And then maybe a last question is about Setia, and also about how this is how the work you've already had been doing can convert into a business advantage. And do you feel that the responsible supply chain compliance now serves as a differentiator in procurement decisions? And do you also communicate that to your clients or investors?
Okay, for SP Setia, yes, we do have regular communication and engagement with our business associate, be it in terms of any of our ESG initiatives, looking into OSHA, for example, looking into integrity. So basically, at all levels, we do have certain platform and medium to make sure that our business associate based on our supply chain is aligned to what Setia wants to do. So we have our annual CEO dialogue with them, making sure that they are clear and being refreshed in terms of our aspirations, roadshows and all that. So we do have integrity pledges as well, for example, when you talk about anti-corruption and ethics. And basically looking into that, yeah, it is a differentiator when it comes to procurement altogether, because I think there's more things to look at right now. Of course, in terms of checklists, we have a lot of things to look at, but on the other side of the wall, I think the suppliers will also need to be aligned and understand in terms of not only Setia, but the whole of Malaysia in terms of the corporate world is actually looking into this locally and globally as well. So yeah, that's where we stand. Thanks.
Thank you. I think that's very supportive of I think what has already been shared and how it can also serve in future engagements. That brings us to the end of this panel, and I think a bit closer to lunch. Thank you all panelists for very thoughtful contributions, and I think what stands out for me is the ability to listen, but also to trust and to think way beyond the checks and balances and the checklists and the audit forms. So thank you for bringing that to the table also today. And I think now the real test is how do we convert this compliance into continuous long-term performance, and also how to turn this ESG risk management to an advantage. So we break for lunch shortly, head into the next sessions, and I encourage all panelists and delegates to engage. But for now, thank you very much, and looking forward to engage more.
Thank you very much, Ms. Isabel, and for all the speakers who participated in this session. As a gesture of appreciation for the presentation, may I please invite Mr. Dirk and Mr. Supun once again on stage to present the souvenirs to Puan Zalili, Mr. Bora, Ms. Tan, and Puan Noralisa. And let's all have a group photograph together, please. Can we have a big round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, for our moderator and the panelists. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. And now we have concluded the morning sessions of the conference. We're now adjourned for lunch.